Behind the calm streets and white picket fences of Massachusetts lies a darker truth, one written in blood and betrayal. A landlord's body was found hidden beneath the bed, a lover slain on a restaurant floor, a collector shot in his own home, his will forged before his body turned cold. Each picture, silent, cruel, and bloody. And decades behind bars await these women. But for their victims, time has already stopped. And this is Inside New York's Most Dangerous Female Killers, Shocking Murders, and True Crime Documentary. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Sandra Coto Navarro. Some debts are paid in cash, others, as this case proved, are paid in blood. In January 2025, residents of a quiet apartment building in Kew Gardens Hills, Queens, were stunned when police discovered the body of 55-year-old Superintendent Jose Portillo under a tenant's bed. The tenant was 48-year-old Sandra Coto Navarro, who owed nearly $24,000 in back rent. Prosecutors later said she chose to end her dispute with her landlord through violence. On the morning of January 14, Portillo entered her apartment on 70th Avenue to collect rent on behalf of the building's owner. Surveillance footage showed him walking in, it never showed him leaving. Inside, police would later find a crime scene so disturbing that one investigator called it a desperate attempt to erase reality. Detectives believe a heated argument escalated into a fatal assault. The medical examiner found Portillo suffered multiple blunt force injuries to the head. A plastic bag had been forced over his face, causing asphyxiation. After his death, his body bore post-mortem cuts to the neck and leg, signs, prosecutors alleged, that Navarro tried to dismember and hide what she had done. When Portillo failed to answer calls, his co-workers grew worried. At 5 p.m., they requested a welfare check. Moments before officers arrived, Navarro's husband returned home from work. Surveillance confirmed he had been gone all day. He directed police to the bedroom, where the odor of bleach filled the air. Under the bed lay Portillo's body, wrapped in garbage bags and clothing. Initially, Navarro told detectives she had already paid Portillo $23,000 and that he had left shortly afterward. But video evidence proved otherwise. Investigators found mops, blood residue, and cleaning products near the bed. DNA samples linked the scene directly to Navarro. Navarro was arrested on the spot and charged with second-degree murder, tampering with physical evidence, and criminal possession of a weapon. She was arraigned 2 days later. In court, she appeared calm, wearing handcuffs and what reporters described as a faint smirk. She has not entered a plea. If convicted, she faces 25 years to life in prison. Neighbors reacted with disbelief. Many described Navarro as quiet and polite, while others left flowers and a single rose for Portillo, the man who had cared for their building for decades. His ex-wife broke down outside the courthouse. He went there to help them, she said. They killed him instead. The case drew attention across New York City, sparking debate about how financial stress can spiral into lethal violence. From tragedies like this, hard truths emerge. Never let desperation justify deceit or aggression. When conflict builds, seek lawful mediation before emotion dictates the outcome. And always recognize warning signs, withdrawal, hostility, or financial denial, before they explode. Awareness and dialogue remain society's strongest form of prevention. In the end, silence followed the sirens. A man died doing his job, and a woman destroyed her future to avoid a debt. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press hype, stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2. Germania Terrero. Some betrayals cut deeper than a knife. This one ended with blood on the floor of a restaurant and a love triangle turned fatal. On the 3rd of March, 2008, inside El Balcon, a small restaurant in West New York, 69-year-old Araceli Lopez, owner, entrepreneur, and once a man in love, was murdered. The person accused of orchestrating the crime was Germania Terrero, a 46-year-old bank manager and Lopez's former lover, who had worked her way up from waitress to restaurant manager. Prosecutors said Terrero's ambition and jealousy had converged in a deadly plan to rob the man who had once shared his home and his heart with her. According to court testimony, Terrero enlisted 2 men, Robert Santana, 35, and Christian Molina, 34, her new boyfriend. Santana told the jury that he and Molina waited for Terrero's signal, a phone call, before entering El Balcon. The call came that afternoon. Inside, Lopez was alone. Within moments, the robbery turned to murder. Molina plunged a long knife into Lopez's stomach, partially disemboweling him, then beat and kicked the elderly man as he collapsed to the floor. The crime scene was gruesome. Blood spattered across tiled floors, broken glass on the counter. Prosecutors argued that Terrero didn't need to be in the room to be responsible, she had set everything in motion. The investigation, led by homicide detective Alex Rivera, stretched for 10 months. Police tracked phone records, money transfers, and witness statements. The turning point came when Santana, under suspicion, confessed the plot chapter and verse while wearing a hidden wire placed by investigators. His recorded admission sealed Terrero's fate. By 2011, after years of silence, the case went to trial. Assistant Prosecutor Pete Stoma called Terrero the driving force behind a brutal and senseless killing. The defense countered that she was caught between two men, Lopez, her former lover, and Molina, the jealous younger man who acted on his own. Terrero's attorney, Peter Willis, told jurors she never ordered a murder and claimed the robbery had spiraled beyond her control. But the jury saw it differently. On the 7th of April, 2011, Terrero was found guilty of felony murder and aggravated manslaughter. Though acquitted of intentional murder, the jury concluded her orchestration of the robbery directly led to Lopez's death. On June 28, Judge Joseph Isabella sentenced her to 30 years in state prison with no chance of parole. Molina, believed to have fled to Venezuela, remains a fugitive. At sentencing, Terrero stood silent, her expression unreadable. Behind her, Lopez's family wept. His daughter, Belkis Orozco Lopez, said her father had trusted Terrero from day one, a trust she now called the biggest mistake of his life. The tragedy left lessons carved in loss. Greed always corrodes loyalty. Romantic manipulation can end in ruin. And those who conspire in silence share the guilt of those who strike. Justice can move slowly, but it never forgets the voice of the dead. Some crimes start with love, but end only in the cold permanence of betrayal. Number 3. Donatilla O'Mahony. Some inheritances are written in ink. Others, as this case revealed, are written in blood. In the quiet community of Aquebogue, New York, 69-year-old antique engine collector Lee Peterson was known for his kindness and craftsmanship. But in March 2020, that legacy ended abruptly when his body was found inside his home, shot once in the back of the head. The killer was not a stranger. Prosecutors said it was Donatilla O'Mahony, a woman he trusted, who murdered him out of greed and then forged his will to steal his homes. Investigators learned that months before the murder, O'Mahony had asked her friend, George Woodworth, a 76-year-old from New Jersey, to buy 2 handguns. One was the Sig Sauer 9mm that would later take Peterson's life. On the night of the 8th of March 2020, O'Mahony borrowed Woodworth's car. Surveillance footage placed that vehicle near Peterson's residence and then returned to her home hours later. When detectives entered Peterson's property, they found signs of a struggle but little else. His phone, keys, and cash were missing. It was a clean, calculated killing. In the weeks that followed, O'Mahony produced a will naming herself as the sole inheritor of Peterson's Aquebogue and Lynbrook homes. She claimed Peterson had wanted her to have everything. But investigators already had the real will, and her signature didn't match. A 9-month investigation by Suffolk County homicide detectives unraveled the deception. They collected phone records, cell tower data, and testimony from Woodworth, who admitted O'Mahony asked him to dispose of the gun and clothing. He destroyed them, but kept a bag of unused ammunition. When tested, the bag revealed DNA from both O'Mahony and Peterson. Detectives arrested O'Mahony on the 28th of December 2020 at JFK Airport. She was with her daughter and holding one-way tickets to El Salvador, her home country. The trial was turbulent. The first ended in mistrial when a juror recognized one of O'Mahony's relatives. In the second, Woodworth testified that she had orchestrated everything. Defense attorney Ira Weissman conceded the forgery but argued that a fake will does not equal a murder. The jury disagreed. On the 4th of January 2023, O'Mahony was convicted of second-degree murder, forgery, and attempted grand larceny. At sentencing, Judge Timothy P. Maze delivered a blistering rebuke. He imposed 25 years to life for murder, plus consecutive time for the other charges. O'Mahony, then 43, stood motionless before the bench, her face pale and expression unreadable. She insisted, "I didn't kill him." Friends of Pedersen filled the courtroom, many in tears. "He was the guy who helped everyone," one neighbor said. Another whispered, "Greed killed him." District Attorney Raymond Tierney called it a cold-blooded crime driven by betrayal and greed. From this case, 3 warnings echo: greed often wears a familiar face, paper trails can reveal hidden crimes, and trust, when unchecked, can turn fatal. Awareness, skepticism, and due diligence remain the best safeguards against manipulation disguised as friendship. Evil rarely announces itself, it simply arrives wearing the face of someone you once called a friend. Number 4. Lauren Pazienza. It happened in a moment so brief it could have passed unnoticed, yet it stole a life and shocked a city. In March 2022, Lauren Pazienza, a 26-year-old event planner from New York City, walked through Chelsea after visiting art galleries with her fiancé. She had been drinking, arguing, and in her own words, just angry at the world. Minutes later, that anger would end the life of Barbara Meyer-Gustern, an 87-year-old vocal coach beloved across Broadway and New York's theater community. After leaving Chelsea Park in frustration, Pazienza stormed down 28th Street. Surveillance cameras captured her spotting Gustern, who had just finished a rehearsal and was walking home. Without provocation, Pazienza crossed the street, shouted obscenities, and shoved the elderly woman from behind. Gustern fell hard onto the concrete, striking her head. Bystanders rushed to her side as blood pooled beneath her. She was taken to the hospital with massive brain bleeding. 5 days later, she died after being removed from life support. Witnesses described Pazienza walking away, as if nothing had happened. She stayed in the area for about 20 minutes, then took the subway to her apartment in Queens. That night, she said nothing to her fiancé. The next day, she began deleting her online presence, her social media accounts, her wedding website, and fled the city to stay with her family in Long Island. Police investigators traced the attack through surveillance footage and public tips. NYPD Chief of Detectives James Essig called it a disgusting and disgraceful offense against a vulnerable, elderly female. When the footage went public, Pazienza turned herself in on March 15, the same day Gustern passed away. She was charged with first-degree manslaughter and second-degree assault and held at Rikers Island after her bail was revoked. 18 months later, on the 23rd of August 2023, Pazienza pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter, accepting a deal that spared her a potential 25-year sentence. During sentencing on September 29, Justice Felicia Menon noted her inability to take responsibility and extended the term to 8.5 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. In court, Pazienza stood pale and expressionless. The courtroom filled with emotion as Gustern's grandson, A.J. Meyer-Gustern, addressed her directly. "My Baba felt safe in this city, even late at night, and you've ruined that." He told reporters afterward, "There's no forgiveness here. Actions have consequences." District Attorney Alvin Bragg called it a deadly act born of senseless rage. The story left New Yorkers questioning how a single impulsive act could destroy 2 lives, one lost, one wasted. From tragedies like this, a few truths stand clear: anger left unchecked becomes a weapon. Empathy is the only true restraint, and every moment of impulse carries irreversible cost. Compassion, not control, defines our humanity. Some crimes are loud, others whisper a warning. That 1 second of rage can echo for a lifetime. Number 5. Angelika Graswald. 2 kayaks, calm waters, and a quiet spring evening on the Hudson River, but by nightfall, only one person returned alive. On the 19th of April 2015, Angelika Graswald, a 35-year-old Latvian immigrant, joined her fiancé, Vincent Viafor, on a kayaking trip near Bannerman's Island, roughly 50 miles north of New York City. To friends, they seemed inseparable. But investigators would later call what happened a love story turned lethal. The couple spent hours exploring the island before paddling back at dusk. Conditions were harsh: 40-degree water, strong winds, and fading light. Viafor wasn't wearing a life jacket, a wetsuit, or even a spray skirt. He'd been drinking. His kayak began to fill with water and sink. Angelika watched as he struggled to stay afloat, his cries echoing across the Hudson. Then, silence. She waited nearly 20 minutes before calling 911, saying calmly, "I think he drowned. I need him to be rescued." Rescuers pulled her from the icy water, shivering but alive. Vincent's body was recovered nearly a month later near West Point. The medical examiner ruled it a homicide. The kayak's drain plug had been deliberately removed. At first, the tragedy appeared accidental. But 2 weeks later, Angelika was arrested. During a 12-hour interrogation, police claimed she admitted to removing the plug and said, "It felt good knowing he would die." Prosecutors alleged a clear motive. She wanted out of the relationship and hoped to collect $250,000 in life insurance. Her defense insisted her words were misunderstood, the result of exhaustion, fear, and her limited English. They said Viafor's own recklessness caused his death. Charged with second-degree murder and manslaughter, Graswald faced life in prison. Yet, after 2 years in custody, she accepted a plea deal. In July 2017, she pleaded guilty to criminally negligent homicide, admitting she failed to recognize the danger her actions created. On the 8th of November 2017, Judge Robert Freehill sentenced her to 16 to 48 months in state prison, the maximum allowed for that charge. But having already served 32 months in jail, she walked free just 6 weeks later. In court, she appeared composed, wearing beige prison clothes, her eyes fixed forward. "I never wanted him dead," she told the judge. Outside, Viafor's mother said tearfully, "She got away with murder." By December 2017, Angelika was released from Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. She now lives under parole supervision, facing possible deportation to Latvia. She maintains the death was an accident, telling ABC's 20/20, "I don't feel guilty. I feel misunderstood." The case left the community divided, half convinced of cold-blooded intent, half seeing tragedy born of recklessness. Yet its lessons cut deeper. Never ignore red flags in relationships that mix control and resentment. Never underestimate nature's power when safety gear is dismissed, and never let ego override empathy in moments of crisis. These are the quiet boundaries between love and loss. Sometimes, evil hides not in hatred, but in indifference to the moment that changes everything. Number 6. Faye Doomchin. It began as an ordinary afternoon among new acquaintances, coffee, conversation, and a quiet suburban home. By sunset, one woman lay dying. On the 13th of August 2018, in the peaceful neighborhood of Great Neck, Long Island, 66-year-old Faye Doomchin welcomed guests into her North Road home. Among them was Denise Webster, a 61-year-old British tourist visiting the U.S. for a 3-week holiday, hoping to attend an Adam Lambert concert and reconnect with a longtime friend. The two women had met for the first time only hours earlier. By the end of the day, their meeting would make international headlines. After a friendly lunch, Doomchin, Webster, and their mutual male friend returned to the house for coffee and cake. The atmosphere seemed cordial. The friend played the piano while the women talked. Then, in a sudden and inexplicable shift, Doomchin's mood darkened. She looked at her guest and said coldly, "I don't like the woman from England." Moments later, she added, "I need to rid the house of evil." Without warning, Doomchin disappeared into the kitchen. When she returned, she held a kitchen knife. According to Detective Lieutenant Stephen Fitzpatrick, she walked straight toward the victim and plunged the knife into her chest. The single stab wound proved fatal. The friend called 911, but when officers arrived just before 4 p.m., Webster was barely alive. She was rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead shortly afterward. Police arrested Doomchin the next morning and charged her with second-degree murder. Investigators described the killing as unprovoked and senseless. There was no prior dispute, no evidence of self-defense. At her arraignment, Doomchin's attorney told reporters that she suffered from mental illness and requested a psychiatric evaluation. Detectives later confirmed she had a history of violence. In 1999, she had been arrested for assault involving a weapon. At the Nassau County Courthouse, Doomchin appeared pale and distracted, dressed in a beige jumpsuit, her eyes unfocused as the charges were read. She pleaded not guilty and was remanded without bail. The judge ordered her held pending mental health assessments. If convicted, she faced up to 25 years to life in prison. The tragedy rippled across 2 continents. In the United Kingdom, Denise Webster's husband, Tommy, posted a heartfelt message. "My wife was stabbed and murdered. I will miss her with all my heart." Friends from the Adam Lambert fan community flooded social media with condolences. The story reignited public discussion about untreated mental illness and the unpredictable nature of violent psychosis. It also underscored the vulnerability of travelers far from home. From cases like this, 3 lessons remain vital. Always be cautious when meeting unfamiliar people in private settings. Recognize early warning signs of erratic behavior. And never dismiss statements that suggest delusion or hostility. They can turn deadly in an instant. Awareness can mean survival. Some tragedies come from hatred, others from madness, but both remind us how thin the line is between safety and danger. Number 7. Brigitte Harris. Some crimes begin long before the day they're committed, but for Brigitte Harris, that day started when she was 3 years old. On the 28th of July 2007, inside her Rockaway apartment in Queens, 29-year-old Brigitte Harris, a security guard at John F. Kennedy International Airport, confronted the man she feared most, her father, Eric Goodridge, a 55-year-old Liberian immigrant. To outsiders, he was just a visitor. To Harris, he was her abuser, a man she claimed had raped and molested both her and her sister for years. The confrontation began calmly. Harris begged him not to take her young nieces to Liberia, terrified that he intended to abuse them as he had her. When she accused him of molestation, he reportedly dismissed it. Rage and trauma collided. She sprayed him with pepper spray, and in the struggle that followed, she overpowered him using her security training. Harris handcuffed her father to a chair. As he screamed, she gagged him with a towel secured by duct tape. Then, in a chilling act rooted in vengeance and fear, she used a scalpel she had purchased weeks earlier on eBay to cut off his penis, an action she later described as taking away his weapon. He died of asphyxiation before bleeding to death. Harris burned the severed organ on her stove to prevent reattachment and threw it under the Rockaway boardwalk. Hours later, she called 911 and confessed that someone was bleeding to death but never went to the police. Her sister found her in shock, still holding the scalpel. Harris was admitted to a psychiatric ward and later charged with second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter. The investigation revealed that Harris had researched the 1993 Lorena Bobbitt case and suffered from severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Psychiatrists confirmed a long history of sexual abuse. Her lawyer, Arthur Idala, argued that Harris never intended to kill her father but to protect her nieces. In 2009, after a widely followed trial, the jury found Harris guilty of second-degree manslaughter, rejecting the more serious charges. One juror explained, "We couldn't call her a murderer. She acted recklessly, not with intent." On November 8, Judge Arthur Cooperman sentenced her to 5 to 15 years in prison, the maximum penalty for manslaughter, despite 7 jurors writing to request leniency. At sentencing, Harris appeared calm, her voice steady as she said, "I wanted to stop the cycle." Public opinion was sharply divided. Activists and lawmakers like Senator Chuck Schumer expressed sympathy, calling her a victim of lifelong abuse, while her father's relatives insisted she fabricated the allegations. Released in 2012 after 5 years, Harris began advocating for survivors of sexual violence. Her case remains a haunting reminder: silence protects abusers, trauma reshapes judgment, and justice without compassion fails both victim and society. Survivors need systems that heal, not cages that punish. Some inherit pain, others end it. The difference lies in what the world does before they break. Number 8. Reshma Massarone. It began with a message, a digital whisper that would unravel an American banker's life and expose a deadly secret. In the summer of 2023, Reshma Massarone, a 40-year-old former bank manager from New York, was living what seemed like a respectable life. But beneath that facade, prosecutors said, she was plotting a murder. Her target was her own brother-in-law, a man she had known for decades, and the plan was simple: pay $10,000 to have him killed while he was traveling in Guyana, South America. According to court documents, the conspiracy began on the 20th of July 2023, when Massarone reached out via Facebook Messenger to an acquaintance known as Individual 1, who happened to be a Guyanese police officer and close friend of the intended victim. She offered him $10,000 to get rid of the man, swearing on her children's lives that payment would be made once the job was done. The next day, surveillance footage captured Massarone at a Walgreens in Pine Bush, New York, wiring a $2,500 down payment through Western Union, counting 25 $100 bills in crisp precision. She even texted a photo of the receipt through WhatsApp. But what she didn't know was that her supposed hitman had already gone to the authorities. Working undercover, the officer recorded their calls, during which Massarone grew increasingly impatient. Just he, she repeated, clarifying the hit was for her brother-in-law alone. When the plan stalled, she urged faster action, saying, "Rat poison can do a great job." At one point, she threatened the undercover officer, "Either way, if I find someone else to do the job, you'll still get blamed." The victim, alerted to the plot, reported the plan to the U.S. Embassy in Guyana. From that moment, the case became an international operation involving the DEA, NYPD, Homeland Security, and IRS investigators. Agents collected dozens of Facebook messages, phone transcripts, and the damning video of the money transfer. When questioned, Massarone claimed her actions were the result of years of harassment. Her defense team alleged the victim had tormented her for 25 years, ever since being scorned when she refused his romantic advances as a teenager. They argued she acted out of rage, not calculation. Prosecutors disagreed, calling her actions the chilling plan carried out with methodical precision. In March 2024, Massarone pleaded guilty before the U.S. District Judge Kathy Seibel to murder for hire. 5 months later, on the 27th of August 2024, she was sentenced to 114 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Judge Seibel noted her failure to accept responsibility, while U.S. Attorney Damian Williams condemned the scheme as unthinkably heartless. From this case come hard lessons: rage without restraint breeds ruin, digital footprints never fade, and trust, once broken, can destroy more than one life. In the end, one message changed everything, a reminder that silence can save lives faster than violence ever will. Number 9. Claudia Banton. They laughed together at a funeral just hours before. By nightfall, one friend was lying dead on the sidewalk. On the 4th of August 2021, the streets of Crown Heights, Brooklyn, were crowded with mourners gathered after a funeral. Among them stood Delia Johnson, a 42-year-old mother and beloved community figure. Minutes later, she would be dead, gunned down in what prosecutors later described as a cold-blooded execution. The shooter was not a stranger. It was her childhood friend, Claudia Banton, then 46, a woman Johnson's mother once called "like my daughter." That night, Johnson received a phone call urging her to stop by Franklin Avenue. Surveillance footage later revealed what happened next. Around 9:40 p.m., a white Mercedes SUV pulled up and double-parked. A woman with long blonde hair stepped out, calm, deliberate, and carrying a gun. Banton walked behind Johnson, raised the weapon, and fired, once into her head. As Johnson fell to the ground, Banton stood over her and fired again and again, at least 5 shots in total, before fleeing into the Mercedes. When police arrived, they found Johnson lying on the sidewalk, bleeding from her head and leg. Bodycam footage, later shown in court, captured the grim reality: Johnson gasping for air as officers tried to save her. She was pronounced dead at Interfaith Hospital shortly after. What followed was one of New York's most disturbing investigations. Police initially stopped Banton just blocks from the crime scene, but because witnesses mistakenly described the shooter as a man, she was released. It wasn't until detectives reviewed surveillance footage that they realized the error. The white Mercedes, traced through its license plate, led authorities to a woman named Claudia Williams, an alias used by Banton. 3 months later, U.S. Marshals arrested her in Jacksonville, Florida. She had changed her appearance, dyed her hair, and deleted her social media accounts. During her 2025 trial, prosecutors said Banton's actions were methodical, deliberate, and merciless. The motive, however, remained elusive. The two women had attended a funeral together just the day before, smiling in photographs. Defense attorney Jonathan Strauss argued that the video was inconclusive and the prosecution had failed to prove intent or motive. But the evidence, the footage, the vehicle, and witness testimony painted a clear picture. On the 3rd of April, 2025, a Brooklyn jury found Claudia Banton guilty of second-degree murder and criminal possession of a weapon. She was sentenced on May 19 to 23 years to life. Inside the courtroom, Delia Johnson's mother, Delia Berry, looked directly at Banton. "I took care of you," she said, her voice steady. "You were like my daughter." Her words silenced the room. Johnson's daughter, speaking from an Air Force base, thanked Banton for at least ensuring her mother didn't suffer. The tragedy left haunting lessons. Betrayal often comes from those closest to us. Unchecked jealousy can turn affection into violence. And justice, though slow, arrives for even the most deceptive hearts. Sometimes, the cruelest murders aren't driven by hate, but by love twisted beyond recognition. Number 10. Kelly Forbes. Love promised her safety, but within weeks, it turned into a fight for survival and a deadly act of desperation. In November 2007, Kelly Forbes, a 29-year-old beautician from Trinidad living in Merrick, New York, strangled her husband Michael Forbes, 50, with an electrical cord inside their upscale home. They had been married less than 3 months. What began as a union built on security ended in violence, a courtroom battle, and a conviction that divided the community. Kelly had moved to the United States chasing stability for herself and her young daughter. She met Michael, a man twice her age, while working at a beauty salon. He showered her with gifts, financial support, and promises of comfort. But after their wedding, she claimed everything changed. Michael became controlling, possessive, and violent. According to Kelly, she lived in constant fear, especially after discovering that her new husband had served 5 years in prison for rape and robbery. On the morning of the 21st of November, 2007, that fear allegedly erupted into tragedy. Kelly told police that Michael attacked her during an argument, wrapping an electrical cord around her neck. She fought back, kneed him in the groin. Investigators later determined she used the same cord to strangle him to death, while her 7-year-old daughter slept in the next room. But prosecutors painted a very different picture. They argued there were no signs of self-defense, not a scratch, bruise, or mark on Kelly's face or neck. They claimed the act was deliberate, pointing to her actions after the killing. She waited over an hour to call 911 and, before doing so, texted her lover, Jeremy Bryant, a message that read simply, "He's dead." Bryant, who met Kelly on MySpace, testified that she never showed signs of abuse and that she confessed to killing her husband. When police arrived at the home, Michael Forbes was still alive but unresponsive. He was rushed to Nassau University Medical Center, where he died an hour later. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as asphyxiation from strangulation. Kelly was arrested that same day and charged with second-degree murder. Her trial began in June 2008. Prosecutors described her as cold-blooded and calculating, while her defense insisted she was a battered woman acting in self-preservation. On the 16th of June, 2008, a jury convicted Kelly Forbes of manslaughter, rejecting her claim of self-defense. 2 months later, Judge Gerald Carter sentenced her to 21 years in prison, noting that strangling someone takes time. It takes intent. Kelly, visibly trembling, tearfully told the court she never meant for him to die. The reaction was deeply divided. His family called the abuse claims lies. Others, however, saw Kelly as a victim who snapped after years of trauma. The case underscored harsh truths: silence enables abuse, desperation blurs morality, and love can become its own prison. Some marriages begin with vows of forever and end with a single breath taken too soon. From jealousy and greed to desperation and rage, these crimes remind us that danger often hides behind familiar faces and quiet smiles. But these aren't just tales of horror, they're warnings. Warnings about impulse, control, and the fragile balance between love and destruction. If you want to keep uncovering the truth behind America's most chilling female killers, don't let this be where the story ends. Subscribe to Justice Reversed and hit the notification bell, because the next case might be darker, stranger, and closer to home than you think.